If you don't think there's hope for the world, why bother going on?
How's it going, everybody? My name is The Starks, and welcome back to another The Last of Us video. Well, here we have it. The Last of Us HBO achieves Rotten Tomatoes score of 100%. I repeat, The Last of Us show hit 100%. Now, on the website Dixerto, they state that The Last of Us achieves Rotten Tomatoes score of 100%. With the embargo for The Last of Us lifting overnight, with critics now are able to post spoiler-free reviews of the series, and across the board, they've loved it. Season 1 of the show currently has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, meaning it has a perfect score, though there isn't an official critical consensus yet, as that's just from 8 approved reviews. Now, this has actually since changed, and is currently, at the time of this recording, is at 98% with 43 critic ratings. And if I scroll down to score more, see more details, it states that out of 42 rated critics, it's rated fresh, with 1 rating it as rotten, which is really interesting. Now, the average rating here, it shows 8.80 out of 10. Now, that's the average out of these 43 reviews, which is great. I mean, that's a beautiful score. Now, the score will fluctuate until they have all of their reviews out and published and approved. And of course, the critics' consensus will change or actually be updated, as there's no consensus yet on whether it's going to be rotten or fresh. I think it's going to be fresh. Fresh meaning over. I think it's over 60% or something like that. Or actually, it might be over 50%. Or 55 or something like that on Rotten Tomatoes, because I know they have a different score, just kind of a score rating. I really don't know how it works because I don't follow Rotten Tomatoes too much. But what I do know is The Last of Us Season 1 is currently at a 98%, which is just stunning. I think that's incredible. On Dixerto's review of The Last of Us Episode 1, spoiler review, saying that the video game curse is finally broken. They state, and I'm not going to get too much into spoilers, I know they couldn't as well, but I'm not going to give too much details. I'm not going to read all of this review, but they state, for episode 1 is a neon impossible to discuss without getting into plot points, so we'll say this much and move on. That there's stuff before the outbreak with Joel, Pedro Pascal, as well as his daughter Sarah, Nico Parker, and there's the beginning of the main story between Joel and Ellie, Bella Ramsey, a young girl with a, quote, greater purpose than any of us could have ever imagined, which obviously was a line from Marlene, if any of you have seen the trailers. I know I have many times. Now, IGN, they posted a reviews of The Last of Us Season 1 review by Simon Carty, and I'm just going to read some of the headlines here. Is that Bella Ramsey is simply electrifying as Ellie. Okay, it's a credit to the show's creators that 2 Hallmark episodes push queer relationships so firmly to the forefront, as well as The Last of Us is more interested in showing the fallout of violence than the violence itself, which I think is a really interesting depiction of the world building. I mean, a lot of these post-apocalyptic mediums, whether it's in a video game, shows, or movies, like A Quiet Place, for instance, or The Road, which is a great movie. All of these are great, very great stories that tell these beautiful relationships between literally father, son, daughter, father. There's all these different familial relationships between these characters, and I think those are very powerful stories. In this case, obviously, Joel is not related to Ellie, but I hope that was obvious. I hope no one's watching that hasn't watched or played the games. But yes, Joel is not related to Ellie. But the point is, I think that's really interesting. The depiction of violence is more interested in showing on the fallout of the violence than the violence itself. And as we know, Neil Druckmann, the co-president at Naughty Dog and the creator of The Last of Us, at Naughty Dog, is that he mentioned that the violence is going to be toned down. And I know a lot of people on Twitter for some reason were upset about that, but it makes sense. A lot of the violence that's told in The Last of Us and we see a lot of that violence is because we're playing it. You can't play a show, you can't play a video or a movie. Of course, you can play a video game, but you can't play a movie. You have to watch it. It's a passive experience. You're not engaged in that experience. You're immersed in it, and obviously, The Last of Us. It's a very immersed game. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this excerpt from IGN's The Last of Us Season 1 review. And it's just a little bit of a read here. I noticed that they mentioned Alfonso Cuarón, who's a great filmmaker, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this. But they state, tonally obvious comparisons can be made to The Road, but The Last of Us rarely reaches the levels of unrelenting bleakness that Cormac McCarthy's novel nor its subsequent film adaptation did. For each helping of the macabre, there's a small measure of levity or glimmer of light. The Last of Us may present itself as a hopeless world, but over the course of a season, it reveals plenty that's worth fighting for, and in that regard is more reminiscent of Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men in both its themes and visual identity. Low saturated grays, greens, and browns occasionally make way of bursts of flame or the flash of gunfire. Bombed out cities still present flickers of of life and echoes of a civilization worth saving, with both stories ultimately coming down to the successful smuggling of a young woman, Ellie obviously, and the powers of love and the human spirit when combating Mother Nature's cruelest will. Wow, that was very wordy, very well spoken. So I actually didn't realize that a lot of these reviews here. Hold on a second. Before I get to my thought, they mentioned Gustavo Santaolalla, who I want to talk about. So they state the original score is also superb, as familiar refrains from Gustavo's iconic soundtrack sing in harmony with original pieces that pulse and drive their way through some of the more action-heavy moments. I am pumped for this. I'm sorry. I am so freaking pumped for this. And now, what I was going to say earlier, though, I didn't realize that a lot of these publications actually have watched the entire season. I just realized this is a season 1 review. I keep thinking it's an episode. This is they're talking about the entire season. It's interesting that they mentioned that rarely reaches the levels of unrelenting and bleakness like in The Road, which is interesting because The Road was really bleak, and if The Last of Us doesn't capture that, I wonder why that kind of that difference in aesthetic. I mean, The Last of Us sure is a hopeful tale and story, which is what they're saying here, and there's a lot of hope for this world and fighting for it. And maybe that's what they want. They want season 1 to be that, and then season 2 to mirror The Last of Us Part 2, which is complete dark and violence and this cycle, the thematics of the cycle of violence and the psychology of doing what you think, your perception of right and wrong, as obviously present and beautifully exhibited by The Last of Us Part 2's narrative. And, they mention, it's more reminiscent of Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men, which, by the way, I did not enjoy. I thought it was a little too much of a pretentious film. Children of Men, it was the cinematography was great, and I get the concept and the theme of wanting to save the world. The Children of Men is a tale. I know this isn't The Last of Us, but because they compared it to that, Children of Men is basically the humans stop having children, and they have to they're trying to figure out a way to they're trying to live, obviously, but it's like a dystopian kind of story, and they're trying to save this one lady who's apparently pregnant, and they haven't had a pregnancy in I want to say over 50 years, which, I mean, to think about is a really cool concept. I mean, no one's having kids anymore, eventually the population will die out, and then who's to remain, right? So it's a scary thought, but I just didn't really like the film too much. I just don't think it resonated for me. I really like the action sequences in Children of Men, however. So it's interesting that they compare The Last of Us show to its themes and visual identity, and that there's a lot of hope in this. So that's IGN's review. Now on thegamer.com, they say that The Last of Us HBO review roundup, and they kind of collect a bunch of pieces and whatnot of all these different publications that have reviewed The Last of Us Season 1, which is, so there's a Twitter post from this person, and it states that 10 out of 10 from Empire, 10 out of 10 by Collider, 10 out of 10, or I should say perfect, from Radio Times. IGN is a 9 out of 10. IGN's always doing something dramatic. I'm kidding. Obviously, it's their opinion. So 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 from The Telegraph, 7.5 out of 10 from The Consequence, and Entertainment states that they reviewed it, season 1, as a 6.7 out of 10, which is interesting. But The Last of Us is the best video adaptation of all time, and it's also a fantastic TV drama in its own right. This is a quote from I don't know who, but it's a quote that somebody just posted on Twitter. I don't know if there's any merit to this, obviously, but what I will say is that The Last of Us is reviewed at a almost near perfect masterpiece on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic. Metacritic is a different story, but Rotten Tomatoes currently at a 98%. If I refresh the page here, it still resides as a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, season 1, with critic ratings of 43. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The Last of Us show is great. Are you going to be watching it this Sunday, January 15? I know I am. I've booked time off work because I work early on Monday. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take some time off and watch the show because I know it's like almost 2 hours. I'm going to enjoy The Last of Us show. I think I'm a little skeptical about some things, but I know I'm a huge fan of the IP, and it's currently at a 98%, which can change, it can lower or increase, but nonetheless, that is all I have for you, ladies and gentlemen, today. Let me know, like I said, in the comment section below, if you're going to be watching The Last of Us HBO series. If not, tell me why. Is it because you don't want to subscribe to, I don't know, Crave or HBO or wherever you live? Or is it because you're not a fan of this idea of adapting video games into shows? Let me know all that in the comment section below. And of course, with that all being said, I have been the Starks. Peace.